is adopted. I would like to warmly welcome the Secretary-General and other high-level representatives present in the Security Council chamber. Your presence today underscores the importance of the subject matter under discussion. Before each of you is a list of speakers who have requested to participate in accordance with Rules 37 and 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, as well as the previous practice of the Council in this regard. We propose that they be invited to participate in this meeting. There being no objection, it is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2026/553, a letter dated 1st July 2026 from the Permanent Representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the United Nations, addressed to the Secretary-General, transmitting a concept paper on the item under consideration. I now give the floor to the Secretary-General, His Excellency Ms. Antonio Guterres. Madam President,
I thank the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Pakistan for convening today's open debate. Resolution 2788 urges all Member States to make full and effective use of the tools set out in the UN Charter for the peaceful settlement of disputes. Article 33 names them. They include the very essence of diplomacy, dialogue and international law: negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, regional agencies or arrangements, and any other peaceful means the parties may choose. These tools were not designated for moments of consensus. They were designated for times when consensus seems out of reach, when divisions have grown too wide, when solutions are in short supply, and when violence erupts. In other words, they were designed for times like these. Madam President, Excellencies, today conflicts are increasing in number, complexity, length and scope. We see an alarming disregard for international law, impunity is spreading, violations are going unanswered. Each violation unanswered becomes the next violation's precedent. Trust is eroding, and negotiated settlements are becoming harder to reach and maintain. When parties prioritize military solutions over negotiated settlements, civilians pay the heaviest toll. We see this on full display in the Middle East, with devastating consequences in the region and across the globe. The situation is getting out of control. It's teetering on the edge of the unimaginable. The region is being pulled into an ever-widening circle of confrontation. One crisis feeds another, one escalation triggers the next. As this dynamic spreads, the political objectives are becoming increasingly obscured by the confrontation itself. It's time to step back. Attacks on civilian infrastructure are unacceptable. There is no military solution to the conflict. Fighting must stop everywhere in the region, and international navigational rights and freedoms in and around the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb must be fully restored. Diplomacy is the only way forward. That has been my clear and consistent message in my ongoing outreach to leaders. I want to recognize the mediation of Pakistan and countries in the region working to reduce tensions and create space for dialogue. These efforts must be supported and strengthened in pursuit of a peaceful and durable settlement. Meanwhile, in Gaza, despite the so-called ceasefire, civilians continue to pay a heavy price every day. People are being killed in their homes, in their communities, and while carrying out ordinary acts of daily life in Israel, as Israel increases its control of Gaza. At the same time, living conditions remain intolerable and horrific diseases are spreading, with humanitarian operations heavily impeded. An IPC food security analysis released just this morning highlights the fragility of the situation. Despite the life-saving impact of humanitarian aid, the number of those facing high levels of food insecurity is expected to rise in the coming months to 1.4 million people, roughly 70% of the population. This is the bitter toll of restrictions on aid access and continuing violence. In the occupied West Bank, we see creeping annexation with violence, settlement expansion, extensive Israeli military operations, and large-scale displacement. And in Ukraine, the Sahel, Sudan, and many other places, conflict is inflicting enormous suffering, disrupting livelihoods, and uprooting populations with dire humanitarian consequences. Resolution 2788 reminds us of a fundamental truth. Diplomacy may not have succeeded in preventing these conflicts, but it still holds the power to stop them. As we are asked to implement Resolution 2788, I see 6 areas where we can bolster our collective mechanisms for the peaceful settlement of disputes. First, by strengthening the full range of good offices and mediation support of the UN Secretariat. The resolution reaffirmed the role of the Security Council under Chapter 6 of the Charter. But it also encouraged me to continue to use my good offices and ensure that the United Nations is able to lead and support mediation and preventing diplomacy efforts, by helping to bridge differences, by supporting shared analysis of potential threats informed by our teams around the world, by providing member states with options for action and consensus, and this requires making full use of our political and technical capacities and at quarters as well as in the field. UN peace operations, especially political missions and peacekeeping operations, play an important role in this regard and will be addressed by the review which will be released shortly. And it requires early engagement efforts, from shuttle diplomacy to listening tours, exploratory talks, and helping open political space for dialogue and mediation. These efforts are ongoing. For example, in Sudan, my personal envoy is engaging with the parties to encourage restraint and help prevent escalation. The United Nations helped broker a landmark agreement between Yemen's internationally recognized government and Houthi rebels to release more than 1,600 conflict-related detainees in May. And DPPA's mediation support team and standby team of mediation experts continue to deploy extensively in support of UN-led mediation as well as that of our partners. Second, we need to use our network of regional offices and envoys to its full potential and expand where appropriate. Today's conflicts are increasingly regional in nature. Preventive diplomacy and peacemaking must be too. Our regional offices and envoys are some of our most effective instruments for preventive diplomacy, regional cooperation, and building space for political solutions. They also help us operationalize our partnership with regional organizations. One example is what you heard from my Special Representative for West Africa and the Sahel just last week. His ongoing diplomatic work seeks to forge consensual approaches in a deeply divided region. The UN's regional offices and envoys are nimble and cost-effective. By being part of a region's standing diplomatic infrastructure, they have forged working relationships with critical actors, and they can help us maintain our political engagement even when our in-country missions withdraw. Third, this Council must not lose sight of its responsibility to act early and decisively. By deploying Chapter 6 stalls at the earliest possible stage, this Council can help reduce tensions, encourage restraint, and prevent disputes from spinning out of control. It can also give a significant boost to my good offices, including through the work of my envoys. From ceasefires to arms control arrangements and de-escalation mechanisms, this Council can also make use of confidence-building measures to turn the temperature down on intensifying conflicts and to contain violence while the search for political solutions continues. Fourth, the Security Council should engage more regularly in fact-finding. Very often, lack of Council unity stems from different interpretations of what is actually happening on the ground. The framers of the Charter envisaged Article 34 exactly for this purpose, to help foster a common and varnished understanding of the facts underlying any dispute or any situation that may lead to international friction or give rise to a dispute before international peace and security are endangered. The Council explicitly expressed its readiness to use Article 34 in Resolution 2788. To this end, in addition to Council-mandated fact-finding missions, the Council should consider conducting fact-finding by reverting to its practice of visiting countries or regions affected by conflict or disputes. The The Secretariat stands ready to support where appropriate. Fifth, Resolution 2788 emphasizes the importance of integrating inclusive procedures to the peaceful settlement of disputes. This starts with ensuring the full, equal and meaningful participation of women at all levels of decision-making. As long as power inequalities hold back half of our societies, peace will remain elusive. And it entails the meaningful participation of youth in conflict prevention and dispute resolution mechanisms and a strong civil society to help build trust and solidarity. Excellence.
Excellencies. And sixth, I call on every member state to do its part. I commend the many tireless efforts that member states are undertaking every day to advance peace. No diplomatic gesture is in vain. No attempt at dialogue is futile. By taking steps towards the peaceful settlement of disputes, member states are building trust and enhancing the space for the UN's vital political engagement, as well as the participation of regional and multilateral organizations and coalitions. To support these efforts, the United Nations stands ready to lend its technical and operational expertise, knowledge, and services to the full UN membership. Madam President, the United Nations Charter remains humanity's best hope for peace, but it is only as strong as the commitment of those responsible for upholding it. The members of this Council must lead by example. Geopolitical divisions are not a reason for inaction or abdication. Most situations on the Council's agenda are complex. The best path to peace is through compromise and finding common ground. I urge all members of this Council, summon the spirit of compromise that is essential to peace, keep the channels of dialogue open, and spare no effort in the pursuit of peaceful settlements of disputes, a founding principle of this organization. Thank you. I thank the Secretary-General for his briefing. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Distinguished members of the Council, Secretary-General, ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is honored to be presiding over this open debate on the strengthening of the peaceful settlement of disputes following up on Resolution 2788. I'd like to welcome the Secretary-General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and to thank him for his unstinting commitment to preventive diplomacy. Furthermore, I would like to commend Pakistan, who played a role in adopting Resolution 2788. We're grateful for the very successful cooperation we've achieved together with our presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, our debate comes at a time when conflicts are multiplying, crises are taking root, and geopolitical tensions are intensifying. Against this backdrop, the peaceful settlement of disputes is not just an abstract ideal. It is one of the foundations of an international order, the international order established by the UN Charter. Chapter 6 gives us a host of time-tested instruments: negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, the good offices of the Secretary-General, and cooperation with regional organizations. These mechanisms have often been portrayed as ways of putting an end to conflicts, but above all, they are preventive instruments. The primary responsibility is to prevent differences from degenerating, from tensions to not take root, and for the recourse to force to never be the way out by default. Preventive diplomacy begins long before the first gun is fired. Preventive diplomacy requires detecting risks, establishing the facts, keeping the channels of dialogue open, creating the conditions for de-escalation, and giving credible alternatives to violence. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have the instruments. The question is not about whether they exist, but how effective they are. Too often, they are activated too late, applied unevenly, or shorn of the political follow-up necessary for them to produce the expected results. Resolutions are adopted, but they are not implemented in full. Sanctions are adopted, but their implementation is delayed or they are weakened. Monitoring mechanisms are weakened, although the violations continue. Demands for a ceasefire or for withdrawal are formulated, but the measures backing them up are not sufficiently robust to ensure that they are implemented. In other words, we do have the mechanisms on paper, but progressively they are losing the capacity to influence behavior on the ground. However, when it comes to prevention, time is absolutely vital. Mediation that is begun too late often works in parallel with a crisis without preventing it. A sanction that's decided on after months of violence can punish, but it will no longer prevent the violence from happening. A resolution without any follow-up risks becoming a statement of intent rather than an instrument of peace. The challenge we are confronting today is not a lack of mechanisms. It resides in our collective capacity to mobilize these instruments sufficiently early and to ensure that they are fully operational and that their implementation is guaranteed. For the DRC, this conclusion is very concrete. Resolution 2773 set very clear requirements: an end to hostilities, a withdrawal of foreign forces, an end to assistance provided to armed groups, and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of my country. Its implementation stretches beyond our particular case, the case of the DRC. It is a litmus test for the credibility of the Security Council, because a resolution which has no effect not only weakens peace, which it aims to protect, but it weakens the very authority of the Council. This is why Resolution 2788 is particularly significant. It recalls that prevention hinges not only new political commitments, it hinges in particular on our ability to wield those instruments, the ones enshrined in the Charter. However, dialogue cannot substitute for the implementation of existing obligations. Mediation cannot replace respect for international law. They are complementary. Lasting peace requires dialogue, but also the genuine implementation of decisions that were willingly adopted. In the east of the DRC, illicit natural resource exploitation is a clear illustration of this reality. This exploitation is not the consequence of the conflict, it's one of its drivers. It funds armed groups, weakens state authorities, sustains criminal economies, and compromises peace efforts in the long term. Preventing conflicts, therefore, also requires us to tackle the drivers of said conflicts. For that reason, prevention must go hand in hand with security, diplomacy, governance, justice, development, and the fight against impunity. Ladies and gentlemen, our action should be guided by three priorities. First, ensuring prevention is a genuine collective reflex. This can be achieved by wielding the instruments the Charter makes available to us earlier. Second, strengthening the implementation of our decisions. Every important resolution should be accompanied with clear follow-up, clear-cut responsibilities, regular reporting, and a real capacity to respond to non-respect for commitments. Third, upholding the integrity of existing mechanisms. Fully operational subsidiary bodies, effective follow-up mechanisms, good officers enjoying robust support. All of the above are indispensable for credible prevention. Furthermore, we need to continue buttressing cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations in accordance with Chapter 8 of the Charter. The African experience demonstrates that this complementarity often allows us to take action at an earlier stage, and to do so closer to the reality on the ground with a better understanding of local dynamics. Distinguished members of the Council, lasting peace can never be achieved through the silencing of guns alone. It hinges on our collective capacity to prevent crises before they tip over into open conflict. The measure of the Security Council's credibility does not boil down to the number of resolutions that the Council adopts. Its credibility is measured by its ability to enact the mechanisms it establishes and to ensure decisions it takes are respected. We do have the instruments. Our collective responsibility is now to use them at an earlier stage, more systematically and more consistently. Because the best resolution to a conflict is the one that would have prevented it from breaking out in the first place. I thank you.
I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank you, Madam Foreign Minister, for convening and for personally presiding over this important debate. And we are very thankful for your most articulate statement. And I also wish to express Pakistan's profound appreciation to the Secretary General for his leadership, for your fearless upholding of the Charter and its purposes and principles and international law. And particularly here today, Secretary General, for your thoughtful and practical forward-looking recommendations in follow-up of Resolution 2788. These recommendations carry significance far beyond today's meeting, and their sustained implementation in the years ahead would strengthen not only the mechanisms for peaceful settlement of disputes, but the implementation of the Charter itself. And they can help restore conflict prevention and resolution to its rightful place at the heart of the United Nations and translate the promise of Chapter 6 into practice. We therefore hope that the Council, the wider membership, and the United Nations system will take these recommendations forward with consistency, adequate resources, and political resolve. Madam President, Resolution 2788, unanimously adopted during Pakistan's presidency of the Security Council last year, was conceived in that exact spirit. It reaffirmed a simple and urgent principle that diplomacy must not be the instrument we scramble for after peace has failed. It must be the means through which we prevent that failure. The Charter provides adequate peaceful mechanisms. Article 33 offers negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, regional arrangements, and other means chosen by the parties. Article 34 enables the Council to examine disputes and situations that may lead to international friction. The deficit lies in the delayed, selective, and inconsistent use of these mechanisms. We have witnessed that all too often the Council engages only after positions have hardened, trust has collapsed, and narrowed the space for compromise. The resulting costs are visible in protracted conflicts, unresolved disputes, and situations of foreign occupation where delay entrenches injustice and inaction manifests in acute human suffering. Madam President, the principles of Pakistan's foreign policy and diplomatic practice reflect its firm belief in the pacific settlement of disputes. On the core issue bedeviling peace and stability in South Asia, the long-standing Jammu and Kashmir dispute, Pakistan remains committed to a peaceful settlement in accordance with the numerous resolutions of this Security Council that affirmed the principle of self-determination of the Kashmiri people and provided that the final disposition of the state of Jammu and Kashmir will be decided through the democratic method of a free and impartial plebiscite to be conducted under the auspices of the United Nations. A recent practical manifestation of Pakistan's attachment to peaceful settlement is the effort undertaken to facilitate a lasting resolution to the conflict in West Asia. Together with the brotherly countries and partners, Pakistan continues to play a constructive mediating role between Iran and the United States, facilitating engagement that culminated in the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding and the initiation of subsequent negotiations. The Islamabad MOU was a clear demonstration of what determined diplomacy can achieve. Channels were opened, parties were brought together, precious lives were saved, and all efforts redirected towards dialogue. We regret the renewed outbreak of hostilities and the interruption of the diplomatic process, which has once again exposed the region and the wider world to grave risks. We earnestly hope that all parties will exercise restraint and return soon to the negotiating table to pursue a durable settlement and lasting peace. We believe that whenever negotiations falter, the answer is not in less, but more determined diplomacy. Pakistan will continue its earnest efforts in that spirit. Madam President, Secretary General, Complementing these SG's recommendations, we would like to propose the following focused measures to ensure implementation of Resolution 2788. First, the Council should engage at the earliest signs of friction, not when a crisis has already erupted. It should encourage direct communication, restraint, and practical confidence-building measures, including hotlines, deconfliction arrangements, transparency measures, humanitarian gestures, and commitments to avoid inflammatory rhetoric. Second, the Council should establish structured follow-up for the implementation of its resolutions. Where a dispute remains unresolved or a relevant resolution remains unimplemented, the Council should receive periodic assessments, identify obstacles, call upon the parties to select appropriate peaceful means, and support a time-bound diplomatic process. A Council resolution must not mark the end of the Council's engagement. It must initiate an accountable implementation that should lead to resolution of that conflict. Third, in an age of competing narratives, facts are not merely a procedural requirement. The Council should make early and effective use of Article 34. Impartial inquiry, discrete fact-finding, technical assessment, and reporting by the Secretary General can establish a credible understanding of events, counter disinformation, reduce miscalculation, and provide an objective basis for diplomacy. Fourth, the Charter's mechanisms must not remain an abstract catalogue of possibilities. They must become readily available options for timely action. The Secretariat should develop a practical Chapter 6 toolkit. It should enable the Council to match the nature of a dispute with the most appropriate peaceful means for settlement. Fifth, stronger political and material support must be provided to the Secretary General's good offices and the impartial role of the Secretariat. The Secretary General, his envoys, and representatives should be enabled to open district channels, convene parties, facilitate dialogue, and develop mutually acceptable options. At the same time, the mediation support unit must receive adequate resources. Sixth, legal and judicial settlement must occupy a more prominent place in the Council's work. Where disputes involve questions of law, the Council should encourage recourse to the International Court of Justice, arbitration, or other appropriate legal mechanisms. And where necessary, it should also consider seeking advisory opinions from the Court. Seventh, cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations must become more systemic. Regional organizations bring contextual understanding and political access. The United Nations brings charter-based legitimacy, impartial convening authority, and technical capacity. Joint analysis, regular information sharing, coordinated mediation, exchange of lessons learned, and complementary diplomatic engagement can bring these respective strengths together while preserving regional and national ownership. And finally, the Council should periodically review its Chapter 6 practice. It should assess where early engagement succeeded, where opportunities were missed, which mechanisms proved effective, and how lessons can be institutionalized. Such a review must not become another reporting exercise. Its purpose should be to build a culture in which prevention is mainstreamed, implementation is monitored, and peaceful settlement becomes the preferred measure of success. Madam President, together with the Charter, Resolution 2788 will continue to remain a living framework for prevention, diplomatic engagement, and practical cooperation. It is an important beginning, not the completion of our task. Its value will ultimately be measured not by the unanimity with which it was adopted, but by the consistency with which it is implemented. Pakistan hopes that member states will continue in the years ahead to advance its implementation. As the Secretary General emphasized, today, the imperative of peaceful settlement is more urgent than ever. At a time when armed conflicts are growing across regions, the costs of delayed diplomacy are becoming more evident. Every new crisis underscores a simple truth. There is no military substitute for a just and lasting peace. We must therefore place renewed emphasis on prevention, dialogue, mediation, and peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with the Charter. History documents the wars that broke out. It rarely records the war that did not begin because a channel remained open, a mediator persisted, a leader exercised restraint, or an institution acted in time. Yet, those unseen victories are diplomacy's highest achievement. Alongside occasions where disputes were resolved through peaceful means and conflicts settled peacefully on the negotiating table. Let Resolution 2788 help strengthen a United Nations that does that more effectively, delivering peace and justice in the true spirit of the Charter. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Madam President, allow me to express gratitude to the Democratic Republic of the Congo for convening and leading on this important and timely debate. I also express appreciation to the United Nations Secretary General for his briefing and for his leadership and principled vision for a more secure world. With global divisions deepening and mistrust on the rise, the need for early engagement and peaceful settlement of disputes has never been greater. The United Nations Charter points the way forward. Chapter 6, especially Article 33 and 34, call on all parties to seek solutions through negotiation, mediation, and judicial means before tensions escalate. These articles also give the Security Council the authority to investigate situations that could threaten international peace and security. Security Council Resolution 2788, tabled by Pakistan and adopted unanimously by the Council last year, reinforces this approach, urging all member states to make full and proactive use of these tools to peaceful settlement of disputes and to prevent conflicts before they erupt. In that regard, I would like to highlight the following points. First, prevention and conflict resolution efforts are stronger when they fully integrate regional and sub-regional organizations and foster deeper complementarity between the United Nations and the African Union. These actors are closest to emergent risks and best placed to shape effective, locally tailored responses. Therefore, supporting AU-led initiatives and reinforcing their capacity for mediation and conflict resolution is essential for effective prevention and durable peace. Second, building a culture of conflict prevention requires more than reacting to crises. We must summon the political will to invest early, listen early, and act early, shifting our focus from crisis response to early action. Even in times of financial strain, early warning and mediation capacities must be protected and prioritized. They are the very foundation of lasting peace. But prevention and conflict resolution demand honesty about history. In Africa, too many conflicts are rooted not only in today's governance challenges, but in the unfinished business of colonization and decolonization. The legacy of colonial rule still shapes division and drives instability. Yet all too often, international responses repeat the errors of the past. Conflict resolution is more than the suppression or perhaps the elimination of violence. Moreover, Durable peace in Africa cannot be achieved by simply deploying peacekeeping forces. It's time to review this pattern. Our joint efforts require the courage to address these factors directly and to confront the deep-seated grievances and structural injustices that fuel these African crises. Without renewed openness to addressing Africa's colonial past, conflict prevention and resolution will continue to struggle to truly achieve durable solution to the continent's conflicts. Third, the Charter's peaceful settlement tools must be applied impartially and consistently. They lose credibility if we used only when politically convenient. All member states must uphold both the letter and the spirit of the Charter, making peaceful settlements the Security Council's first and most credible option. To conclude, Madam President, history will judge us not by the crises we have described, but by the peace we built around the world. Let us answer this moment with unity and courage in implementing Resolution 2788, so that future generations may inherit a world defined not by conflict, but by our shared commitment to peace and prosperity for all. I thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Somalia. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Madam President, I would like to thank Your Excellency for convening this meeting. I also thank the Secretary General for his constructive recommendations in follow-up of Resolution 2788, adopted unanimously last year under Pakistan's presidency of the Council. We meet at a moment when the international landscape is defined by mounting complexity and volatility. Simmering conflicts persist alongside emerging crises, geopolitical rivalries are hardening, and the erosion of trust between states is testing the very foundations of the multilateral order. The proliferation of armed groups and non-state actors, often operating across borders and outside the reach of traditional diplomacy, further complicates the peaceful resolution of disputes and requires renewed international attention. In this environment, the peaceful settlement of disputes is not simply one tool among many. It is an indispensable safeguard against escalation and a reminder that dialogue remains possible even where mistrust runs deep. Promoting international peace and security through the peaceful settlement of disputes lies at the heart of the United Nations Charter and should remain a common priority for all member states. The peaceful settlement of disputes is one of the fundamental principles upon which the United Nations were founded and remains the only viable path to sustaining peace. Greece is a firm proponent of the international law and the UN Charter, under which member states must refrain from the threat or use of force against one another. In this regard, we would like to note the following. Respect for international law is fundamental to safeguarding and strengthening peace and security. Greece, as a credible and steadfast partner, as well as an anchor of stability in the region, remains committed to international law, including the international law of the sea as reflected in the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. Guided by the triptych dialogue, diplomacy, and democracy, the motto of our tenure as an elected member of the Security Council, we continue to spare no effort to promote the peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with the UN Charter, making full use of the tools it provides and contributing actively to relevant initiatives. Respect for international law and good neighborly relations remain the foundation of this effort. and we call on all member states to uphold the same principles as the only viable basis for peaceful coexistence, prosperity, and stability. The implementation of Security Council resolutions by member states and international organizations is essential to maintaining international peace and security. When Security Council resolutions are disregarded, the very foundation of UN Charter is weakened and compromised. Resolutions which all states are required to implement under Article 25 of the UN Charter have significantly contributed to preventing conflicts and their escalation. They also provide the framework for resolving disputes and negotiating sustainable solutions in accordance with international law. We strongly believe that we must reinvest in dialogue and cooperation in good faith. We should make full use of the UN's conflict prevention tools, strengthen preventive diplomacy, and promote dialogue between states as reaffirmed in the Pact for the Future. The increasing complexity and persistence of global conflicts underscore the urgent need for the Security Council to advance the pacific settlement of disputes under Chapter 6 of the Charter and encourage early recourse to the means of peaceful settlement of disputes set out in Article 33 of the Charter. We support the Secretary General's good offices and the work of special envoys and representatives in advancing diplomacy and de-escalation, including in long-standing situations, where dialogue remains essential. Strengthening United Nations peace-building capacities is also instrumental for conflict prevention and sustainable peace. Preventive diplomacy should be grounded in international law, effective use of peaceful dispute settlement, good faith dialogue, and confidence-building measures. The International Court of Justice, as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, plays a vital role in the peaceful settlement of disputes, and member states should make fuller use of its jurisdiction, both contentious and advisory. Madam President, Mr. President, sorry, excuse me. Peaceful settlement of disputes is not a procedural option among many. It is operational core of Charter 6 and the clearest expression of the Charter's founding purpose. Given the growing number of disputes that continue to require our collective attention and engagement, we should reflect on the organization's accomplishments and build on its solid values, reiterating our steadfast support for the UN Charter and international law. In concluding, let us be reminded of the words of Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, who first gave voice to the idea of preventing diplomacy. The true spirit of the United Nations lies not in reacting to crises, but in preventing them before they take hold. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to congratulate the delegation of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for presiding this council this month and for convening this timely debate. I'd also like to thank the Secretary General for his leadership and for the recommendations presented today, which chart a clear path to operationalize Resolution 2788 of 2025, an initiative that Colombia has staunchly supported since it was first begun. Colombia is firmly convinced that multilateralism and preventive diplomacy are not optional tools. Rather, they are categorical imperatives in a world threatened by fragmentation and escalating tensions. We address this Council today not only on the basis of the theory of international law, which we respect and in which we believe, but also from our own experience. Colombia has witnessed how Dialogue, political negotiation, and perseverance can transform a seemingly intractable conflict into a path towards reconciliation. Our historic 2016 peace agreement and the current efforts under the peace policy of President Petro's government show that peace is built through listening, mediation, and by addressing the root causes of violence. Likewise, the United Nations verification mission in Colombia stands as a living testimony as to how the Secretariat and Security Council's support tools, conceived with Chapter 6 in mind, can successfully support the establishment of peace on the ground, respecting national sovereignty and strengthening trust in institutions. For Colombia, the effective implementation of Resolution 2788 of 2025 demands a renewed commitment to three fundamental pillars. First, the proactive use of mediation and arbitration under Article 33. We urge states to make early use of dialogue, negotiation, and the mechanisms for the peaceful settlements of disputes provided under international law. Trust and respect for international law are the greatest safeguards against the notion that might makes right. Second, the nexus between peace, development, and climate justice. We can't speak of conflict prevention without addressing the realities that fuel them: social inequality, exclusion, and the climate crisis are risk multipliers. A true culture of prevention means investing in life, in sustainable development, and in community resilience. And third, strengthening good offices. We firmly support the role of the Secretary General and his ability to undertake quiet and preventive diplomacy before crises erupt. Mr. President, the greatest threat to global peace is inaction and cynicism in the face of human suffering. The Security Council must regain its ability to anticipate crises before they happen. We need to move from a council that manages crises and administers the post-conflict phase to a council that protects peace actively and preventatively. Today, more than ever, in the crisis-based context surrounding us, Colombia reaffirms its unshaking commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes and offers to share its peace-building experience with the United Nations to continue building a world in which dialogue and diplomacy will always prevail over arms. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I commend DRC for convening this open debate and thank Secretary General Guterres for his briefing. I commend the Secretary General's efforts towards peaceful settlement of disputes. The world today is witnessing profound changes unseen in a century, with geopolitical tensions intensifying, armed conflicts erupting on multiple fronts, and hotspot issues getting prolonged and unresolved. The international landscape is fraught with ever-increasing intertwined changes and turmoil. In July of last year, at the initiative of Pakistan, the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2788, calling for peaceful settlement of international disputes and demonstrating the international community's unity and consensus. The international community should stay true to the founding mission of the United Nations, remain firmly committed to peace, and safeguard the hope for peace. I will make 4 points. First, the UN Charter must be resolutely safeguarded. The fundamental principles established by the Charter, such as sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs, and the prohibition of the use or threat of force, are the most important norms governing state-to-state relations. Despite differences in size, national strength, and development stage, all countries are equal members of the international community, and their sovereignty and dignity should be respected. Peaceful settlement of disputes is an obligation of member states under the UN Charter. Dialogue and consultations should be pursued to resolve differences. Use of force without the authorization of the Security Council should be opposed. Renewed conflicts in the Gulf region serve no one's interests. China calls on the relevant parties to heed the strong appeals from the international community and from the region for peace and stability, exercise rationality and restraint, and immediately cease all confrontations so as to create conditions for resuming the implementation of MOU. Early restoration of normal and safe passage through the strait and respect for the legitimate rights and interests of the littoral states of the Strait of Hormuz is a shared aspiration of the international community. The parties concerned should meet each other halfway and handle the situation properly. Second, international equity and justice must be upheld. A major cause for the numerous confrontations and injustice in the world today is the absence of uniform application of international law on an equal footing, and the failure in bringing to light the rights and wrongs of the issues. The world should not regress to the law of the jungle where might is right. All states must strictly observe the international norms with the UN Charter at its core, honor international treaties they have jointly concluded, and fulfill their respective international obligations. The Palestinian question has dragged on for more than 7 decades. This historical injustice cannot be allowed to go any longer. It is imperative to end without delay the sufferings of the Palestinian people, achieve lasting ceasefire in Gaza, improve the humanitarian situation, implement the two-state solution, and find a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question as soon as possible. Third, true multilateralism must be practiced. Prevention, good offices, and mediation are extremely important tools under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter and must be utilized fully and skillfully. It is necessary to support the mediation efforts of the Secretary-General and his special envoys and special representatives with a view to building the greatest possible consensus on political settlement. It is important to review the effectiveness of UN PKOs, transform and upgrade PKOs through the necessary reforms, and create favorable conditions for political settlement. China supports regional organizations in leveraging their unique advantages to advance regional solutions to regional disputes. The UN should play a central coordinating role, promote synergy among different agencies, accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and provide a solid guarantee for security through sustainable development. Fourth, the authority of the Security Council must be revitalized. The Security Council is a core of the international collective security mechanism and the most authoritative and legitimate organ in the international multilateral security system. The more turbulent the international landscape is, the more necessary it becomes for the Council to fulfill its primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. Members of the Council should focus on the shared interests of the international community, adopt an objective and impartial position, and play a constructive role. Penholders should listen carefully to all members, strive to bridge differences, and refrain from pushing proposals which are clearly controversial. The 5 permanent members should strengthen communication and coordination with non-permanent members on major issues, strive to seek consensus, and reduce confrontation. Member states are obligated to uphold the authority of the Security Council, fully implement its resolutions, and avoid selectivity in application or misinterpretation or abuse of the Council resolutions. President, China has always been a builder of world peace, a contributor to global development, and a defender of international order. President Xi Jinping has put forward the important concept of building a community with a shared future for mankind and 4 major global initiatives advocating for a common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security concept. China has been actively engaging in shuttle diplomacy, tirelessly promoting peace talks, and making China's contribution to the political settlement of hotspot issues. China, together with some other countries, have jointly initiated and established the International Organization for Mediation, filling the gap in the international mediation mechanism and providing a new platform for peaceful settlement of international disputes. We invite and welcome the participation of more countries. Last May, Foreign Minister Wang Yi attended the high-level meeting of the Group of Friends on Global Governance, where he proposed 9 key directions for the reform of global governance, forging new consensus for and injecting new impetus to reforming and improving the global governance. Not long ago, China released the white paper titled More Just and Equitable Global Governance, China's Principles, Proposals, and Actions, which systematically illustrates on China's principles, proposals, and practice. As a permanent member of the Security Council and a responsible major power, China stands ready to work with the international community and make unremitting efforts to promote a more just and equitable global governance system and build a world enjoying peace and development, mutually beneficial cooperation, and shared prosperity. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Liberia joins in commending the leadership of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for properly bridging yesterday's vital discussion on natural resource governance directly into today's focus on the peaceful settlement of disputes. We also thank the Secretary General for his forward-looking insights and Pakistan for authoring Resolution 2788, a crucial blueprint for reinvigorating Chapter 6 of our Charter. Resolution 2788 confronts us with a stark reality. The international community routinely treats crisis management as mandatory, but conflict prevention as optional. With over 120 active armed conflicts raging worldwide, the highest in decades, we are witnessing the cost of that logic. The United Nations and World Bank estimate that scaled-up prevention saves up to $70 billion a year, yielding $16 in savings for every single dollar invested. Yet, we continue to fund the funerals of peace while starving its cradle. We cannot keep congratulating ourselves for extinguishing fires that we failed to prevent. The Charter already provides a complete preventive toolkit under Article 33, from mediation and inquiry to judicial settlement. Yet, these tools gather dust while disputes fester into full-scale war. Mr. President, Excellencies, the pages of history and Liberia's own experience confirm that disputes do not emerge in a vacuum. They are fed by institutional fragility, political exclusion, and opaque competition over natural resources, as we heard yesterday. Against this backdrop, to turn Resolution 2788 into concrete operational reality, Liberia puts forward 3 structural prescriptions. First, deploy Article 34 for early, impartial fact-finding. Facts calm rhetoric before accusations inflame violence. The power of technical clarification and sustained Chapter 6 diplomacy was proven in the Nigeria-Cameroon-Bakassi Peninsula dispute, which successfully averted a major regional war. Second, operationalize early warning through structured early action. And we must do this through partnerships. As West Africa's history demonstrates, early warning without early action is little more than expensive observation. The Council must institutionalize direct, practical consultations with regional mechanisms, including the AU and ECOWAS, to translate early warning into joint mediation planning before crises explode. Third, institutionalize resource governance within UN mediation. Given that 40% of intrastate conflicts over the last 60 years are linked to natural resources, preventive diplomacy must adapt. We propose that the Secretary General's special envoys routinely include natural resource mediation specialists on their teams to negotiate localized resource sharing arrangements before revenue disputes fuel armed conflict. Mr. President, the Secretary General's good offices remain our most cost-efficient tool. Peace leaves no ruins, and prevention makes no headlines. Yet, the truth is, every conflict avoided represents thousands of lives saved, communities preserved, and human dignity safeguarded. Resolution 2788 challenges us to replace, as some before me have indicated, reactive management with proactive statecraft. Therefore, let this council no longer be a body that merely records human tragedy, but the body that actively prevents it. I thank you for your kind attention.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Liberia for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Mr. President, we welcome the personal participation of the Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Francophonie, Ms. Therese Wagner, in this open debate dedicated to one of the key areas of the UN's work, that is the peaceful settlement of international disputes. In a complex and fast-evolving system of international relations, wherein the interests of a large number of states are intertwined, it's inevitable for disagreements between states to arise. For that very reason, the toolkit for the peaceful settlement of disputes enshrined in the UN Charter should remain the only basis, with no alternatives, the only basis for the maintenance of international peace and security. We welcome what the Secretary General said today about the UN's willingness to assist Security Council members in overcoming contradictions and disagreements when interpreting events in an impartial manner. This impartiality must be strengthened. We wish to underscore this. A year ago, the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2788, authored by our Pakistani colleagues. This resolution reasserted our commitment to peaceful settlement mechanisms listed in Article 33 of the UN Charter. Today, as part of the follow-up to that document, we are yet again discussing the peaceful settlement of disputes with a view to assessing how this principle is being brought to life. Therefore, we would like to share the following remarks. The Russian Federation has traditionally attached great importance to the principle of the peaceful settlement of international disputes. This principle was given pride of place when the UN was established. It was enshrined in Charter Chapter 6. It was also enshrined in a number of authoritative consensus-based General Assembly documents, including the 1970 Declaration on the Principles of International Law, as well as the 1982 Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes. The way to guarantee the successful implementation of this principle is the strict and in good faith respect for all inextricably linked principles of international law in their entirety, as well as no politicization nor double standards, and the reliance on credible facts. States are duty-bound to settle their disputes using the means and mechanisms they've agreed to. The range of such means listed in Article 33 of the UN Charter is rather broad: negotiations, investigation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements, as well as other peaceful means of the parties' choosing. Sovereign states are free in choosing these means, and any settlement must be carried out in good faith on the basis of the principle of consent of the parties. Within this system, a special role falls to the International Court of Justice of the UN, the main judicial body of the UN. Despite the fact that we're witnessing unprecedented pressure, attempts to use the court to geopolitical ends, including via mass third-party interventions in support of one of the parties to a given dispute, the International Court of Justice has managed to safeguard its independence. Ukraine's attempts to misuse judicial procedure at the court are time and time again being met with failure. As a result, Ukraine is now the respondent in a case regarding Ukraine's genocide against Russians and the Russian-speaking population. At a time when international law is being put to the test, when some states are trying to replace international law with a so-called rules-based order, as well as to politicize judicial procedures, defending the court against abuses and manipulation should be front of mind for the entire international community. Mr. President, the last year has confirmed the demand for arbitration as one of the means of peaceful settlement of disputes enshrined in Article 33 of the UN Charter. A shining example of this is the recently concluded arbitral proceeding between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, a proceeding on the law of the sea, in which the arbitral tribunal, made up of 5 independent arbitrators, unanimously rejected the many claims brought by Kiev. We'd like to underscore the key elements of this decision. Kiev's efforts to challenge the sovereignty of the Russian Federation over the Crimean Peninsula and adjacent waters failed miserably. The arbitral tribunal denied Ukraine's claim for getting back control over resources in the waters of the Crimea and the Sea of Azov, as well as its claims for any kind of compensation. The same fate met Ukraine's attempts to proclaim the Kerch Strait international, something the West supported. The arbitral tribunal officially recognized the status of the Kerch Strait and the Azov Sea as internal waters. The arbitral tribunal recognized as fully founded the temporary restrictions introduced by the Russian Federation, restrictions on the passage of foreign military vessels in some parts of the Black Sea, the construction of the Crimean Bridge, the transfer of the floating drilling platforms under Russian jurisdiction, vessel inspections by Russian border agents in the Kerch Strait were deemed to not be in violation of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The only episode in which the arbitral tribunal issued some remarks to the Russian Federation was the procedural issue, that is, the environmental assessment being conducted when infrastructural facilities were built. Having said that, the arbitral tribunal clearly stated that these procedural criticisms do not result in any obligation to cease action, nor reparations, nor compensation. It also pointed out that the environmental assessment itself was correct. That is, the construction work did not do any damage to the environment. This decision serves as further confirmation of the fact that allegations being leveled at Russia are groundless. It also serves as a reminder of just how vain attempts to use international judicial bodies and arbitral tribunals for geopolitical purposes are. It makes plain that by using an in good faith approach and using international law as opposed to short-term political interests, international justice can hand down objective and fair rulings. Mr. President, the diversity of the means for peaceful settlement of disputes affords states with ample opportunities and vast potential for settling the differences which might arise between them. However, achieving the desired result is only possible if these means are used in good faith with the agreement of the parties to a given dispute, without any externally imposed decisions. The Russian Federation has unstintingly been guided by this approach. We stand ready to continue sharing the experience we've accumulated, experience in the peaceful settlement of disputes, and to share this with all interested partners. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks also to the Secretary General. The UN Charter provides for the settlement of disputes by peaceful means, including through the mechanisms set forth in Chapter 6. In many instances, certain member states and non-state actors disregard that call and openly participate in activities that prevent peace from taking hold. The United States, under the leadership of President Trump, seeks to enable the peaceful resolution of disputes around the globe. In Sudan, the United States continues to press the parties to support a humanitarian truce without preconditions and urge an end to external military support to the parties. In Gaza, we, along with our partners, brokered the 20-point comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, which this Council endorsed in its Resolution 2803. The implementation of this plan in its entirety remains critical. This includes the complete decommissioning of Hamas weaponry and the dismantling of all military and terrorist infrastructure. In the DRC, through U.S. leadership, the Washington Accords have enabled a path towards peace and prosperity for the DRC, Rwanda, and set the broader Great Lakes region. We remain committed to the implementation of these accords, as well as the Doha track, and we will not shy away from promoting accountability for spoilers to peace. Our sanctions of such actors last month, as well as in March, demonstrate this. In Europe, the United States led efforts in the Security Council's adoption of Resolution 2774 last February, urging a swift end to the Russia-Ukraine war and a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. Despite this, hostilities rage on. This war must end. Furthermore, in the Gulf region, the United States has continually sought productive, good faith diplomacy with Iran, efforts which